The quarters. Ellen's bedroom was done in shades of blue. Walls, carpet, curtains, bedspread. She'd chosen blue when her mother let her pick from the chart because swimming pool water looked blue. When Ellen wasn't swimming, the room was her favorite place to be. She could sing along with Paul Anka, practice dance steps from American Bandstand, or simply entertain herself with her thoughts. Now, however, Ellen sat on the bed staring at her sad sack face in the dresser mirror. Not even in the blue-hued domain of her daydreams could she deny what she'd just seen at her father's office. "Did you hang your new dress carefully?" said her mother, who stood in the doorway wearing an old stretched-out bathing suit. "Yes, ma'am." A lie. The dress was a hateful reminder of her eagerness to model it to her father, and she'd thrown it in the back of the closet. "Good. I see you're admiring your new bra," her mother said as she approached the bed, a fruit jar in her hand. "No, I'm not. I'm just deciding what to wear." "Well, do my back first." Her mother handed her the jar, which contained iodine mixed with baby oil, a suntan lotion recipe from a woman's magazine. This was Ellen's most hated chore. The sickly sweet medicinal smell, the greasy, viscous red mixture. But feeling sorry for her mother, she silently resolved to do a good job, which wasn't easy. Her fingers had to navigate layers of peeling skin from previous sunburns to reach the raw, tender skin underneath, and then to dab the lotion on gently. "For God's sake, Ellen, you act like you're petting a snake. Go faster, I'm losing the best sun." "I can't. The peelings are sticking to my..." "Ah, never mind." Her mother took the jar. "I'll do it when I go outside." "Fine, do it yourself," Ellen thought, dropping her arm. The shrew was back in the snap of a finger, even though they'd had a good time shopping that morning. Watching her mother screw the cap back on the jar, Ellen felt a thrill at having a secret over her. Her mother's bosom sagged in the old bathing suit, and as she turned to leave, her stomach pooched out like she'd swallowed half a basketball. Who could blame her father for kissing the beauty queen? "Well, come down when you're dressed. Desi made consomme to settle your stomach before she left." "Desi left?" Just minutes before, Desi had gone on and on about Ellen's getting her first brassiere. "Well, she didn't tell me she was leaving." "Well, since when does Desi report to you? Lester's band is back in town, so I let her off until Monday. Meanwhile, clean up after yourself in the kitchen. And by the way, wear a brassiere every day from now on. You'll grow into it faster that way." "Grow into them?" Ellen scoffed when her mother had gone, as though breasts were plants and the bra was the sun. She didn't want her breasts to grow now, even though her little sister Ginny called them pancake titties. She would die if they bulged from her bathing suit like overblown balloons, like that beauty queen's on the Mardi Gras float. She thought they were going to fall out altogether when the woman leaned over to give Jenny candy. If only they had. Her father would have let out his hee-haw laugh, and that would have been the end of Miss Pascagoula. The kitchen was gloomy with Desi gone. Dressed in shorts and a navy blue t-shirt, the best shirt she had for hiding her bra, Ellen looked out the window as she sipped the consomme. Jenny was digging for pill bugs, which she childishly called roly-polies. It wasn't fair that Jenny could be so carefree while she was so upset. Her mother lay on a chaise lounge on the patio, face to the white-hot sun. Best tan in the country club, people said. No one else willing to suffer the midday heat. When Ellen told Desi she thought it was a dumb thing to do, Desi said, "Dumb like a fox. White men like tanned-up white women, and your mother sure don't want your father's head to turn." Ellen had already known that. Her mother fussing at her father for flirting with waitresses when he'd only been friendly, and that time before, Jenny's still a baby, when she yelled at him into the phone about some woman, then left with her and Jenny to live with Aunt Mabel and Jackson. As Ellen washed the mug in the sink, she realized that if her mother had caught her father at noon, which almost happened, she would leave him again. But this time would probably get a divorce, with her and Ginny then only getting to see him on holidays, like that's what happened to that girl in school. Ellen shuddered. Putting the mug in the drain board, she thought with a jolt that her mother still could catch him, spot hair or lipstick on his clothes, or an earring in his car, or hear from some friend who'd seen him with that woman, like she'd seen on the soap operas. Desi sometimes watched. She had to prevent it, but how? Desi would know. Ellen snuck her bike out of the garage. 20 minutes round trip to the quarters by car meant that at least an hour and 15 minutes by bike. If she didn't talk to Desi for more than 15 minutes, the note she'd left on the kitchen table saying back by 2:30 should cover her. Regardless, she had to go. If she phoned Desi, who didn't like giving advice about her parents, would say it wasn't her business, but if Desi saw her and how desperate she was, she would help. For the first 2 miles, shade from the big oaks on St. Catherine Street gave intermittent relief from the sun. But then came St. Stephen's Road, a treeless commercial thoroughfare which passed the quarters. Waiting at the light to turn onto St. Stephen's, Ellen reached beneath her shirt and back to release the itchy sweat pooled at the band of the brassiere. A truck pulled up at the light with 2 rough-looking teenage boys in the bed. "Hey, cutie, I'll help you with that," yelled one of the boys. "Me too, come on over," the other boy called, and they both laughed. Ellen's face flushing, she turned her back to them and waited until she heard the truck move on. Dang brassiere. She wished she hadn't asked for one. Not only did it feel like a scratchy Band-Aid around her rib cage, that had been a nasty shock, but it was an embarrassment as well. When the light changed, Ellen crossed the street and rode on the shoulder, which was so narrow she had to concentrate to keep from veering into traffic. Exhaust fumes burnt her eyes, and the vehicles speeding past were close enough to make her bike quiver. So close that if her elbow swung out from her side even a little, she thought, it would get knocked off. Her forearm and hand would fall into the gravel, and the stump of her upper arm would swing grotesquely for the rest of her life, like her French teacher's. The horn blast of a moving van made her jump. "Get out of the road, you idiot!" the driver yelled as the van passed. Ellen jumped off the bike into the scrub grass. You're a jackass!" she yelled to the exhaust pipes. She walked her bike then until she turned into the quarters. Mobile's neighborhoods were mostly checkerboards of house styles, but the houses in the colored quarters were uniform, one-story clapboards, most of them whitewashed. Drainage ditches ran along the frontage of the yards where sidewalks would otherwise be, and because there were no driveways, cars parked on the narrow streets or in the weedy yards along with rusted-out vehicles and discarded furniture. When Desi's old Rambler was broken and Ellen's mother picked her up and took her home, Ellen always eagerly rode along. She would press her face to the window to see everything she could through the yellow-brown dust raised by the Cadillac. Little kids chasing chickens or playing in the ditches, older kids standing around in clusters smoking as though it was nobody's business. Adults lounging on the shabby couches and chairs like they were in their living rooms. Even mothers nursing babies, their blouses raised to the world, plus 100 other things she couldn't have imagined. Like the last time, a boy that didn't look much older than Ginny wringing a chicken's neck, and a porch with dead pigeons hanging along the roofline like Christmas lights, which Desi said was voodoo. Like a tourist who visits the same foreign country over and over because it's strange, Ellen loved the quarters. Now with no car, no window, the yellow dust made by the bike settling on her white canvas sneakers and bare legs, Ellen felt uneasy. There were lots of people outside, most of whom paused what they were doing to look when she passed. Even two butt-naked 3- to 4-year-olds stopped fighting over a water hose to stare. The fancy bike made things worse with its lavish chrome and handlebar streamers, which at the end of the first block she scrunched up and held between her sweaty palms and the bars. She wished she had a sign on her back, "Here to visit Desi Moore." Deep ruts prevented Ellen from going fast much of the way, and when she did, rabid-looking mongrels barked ferociously at her heels until they called away. She tried to keep her eyes straight ahead to avoid embarrassment, but couldn't help looking when she heard the sounds of games she knew, like Red Rover or kickball. Once, the scent of barbecue slowed her to a crawl, its lemony tomato aroma just like that of her father's barbecue sauce. Ellen came to a run-down baseball field, a torn chicken wire backdrop and broken stretches of white lines on the mowed weeds running between what would be the bases. Kids of all ages had joined hands in the field as though getting ready for Snap the Whip. She stopped to wipe sweat from her eyes, and when she looked out again, the kids had formed a circle, and a boy was lugging a small white goat to the middle. Amid cheers, the boys released the goat and ran to join the circle. Bleating loudly, the goat darted around, trying to escape, but the linked hands held fast, even when the goat ducked his head and butted them. Each deflection of the butting goat brought a new outburst of laughter, mocked bleating and taunting. "Here, King! Over here, King!" Ellen laughed, her worries for the moment forgotten, and wished she could join them. She would ask her father to borrow a goat for Jenny's birthday party. For her 10th birthday party, he borrowed a monkey, which was fun, until it got diarrhea. She would be lost if her parents got divorced. Maybe her mother had remembered some suspicious little thing and was rising from the chaise that very minute to inspect her father's clothes. Ellen rode on toward Desi's house as fast as she could. Finally, Ellen saw halfway down the block Desi's pink blossom hydrangea bush. But the rambler was gone. Desi and Lester out having fun, probably. She felt like crying. At least she could sit on the shady porch for a minute and think of what to do. Suddenly, she heard the sound of a saxophone. Lester! Well, maybe Desi was on a quick run to the store. She knocked loudly on the screen door, and Lester soon appeared, a heavy-set, good-natured man, whom Desi said drove her crazy all the same. "Why, hello, Miss Ellen. Your mother come for Desi to work after all?" Lester opened the door and peered out at the street as though looking for the car. "No, just me on my bike. I need to talk to Desi. Do you know when she'll return?" "It'll be a while. Mother Moore's down on her back, so she gone across the creek to tend to her." "The creek where y'all fish?" "Yeah, 3 Mile Creek. Just on the other side of that field next to them willows," he said, and pointed toward a small field where the street dead ended. "Oh, less than a 5-minute walk from here across the creek. Go on over if you want. It's just 4 little houses in a row, and Mama's is the first one you come to. Want me to show you? I'll play my sax while we cross the field, and you can march behind me. I remember something like that in a story Desi read to Charles." Ellen grinned. "The Pied Piper. I'm okay, I'll find it." Wait. Let me get you some water, Miss Ellen. You too hot. Red and white splotches all over your face." "No thanks, I'll be all right. I'm not a kid anymore, Lester. I'm going into 8th grade. Anyhow, I'm in a hurry." 8th grade? Well, ain't that something? What's your favorite study in school?" "Science and French." She could see why he irritated Desi. She said she had to go. "French? I could use you on my gigs in New Orleans. Lots of folks talking French, and I can't tell if they're appreciating me or swearing." "You sure about that water? Won't take but a second." "I'm sure. I really have to rush." "Well, let me ask you a quick question. If you was talking in French, How would you say, "Help, I'm having a heat stroke"? The best water she ever had. Ellen thought as she crossed the field, Lester was a card. The field was so packed with nettles, she walked the bike, the nettles stinging her legs. With any luck, Mother Moore would be taking a nap. She was the only mean colored person Ellen ever met. Une sorcière, which meant witch in French. The old woman complained if Ellen went along when Desi took her on errands, and she once told Desi, her raspy, witch-like voice raised for Ellen in the back seat to hear, that it was a sin for the races to mix. Desi replied that she wasn't mixing with the girls, only raising them. She'd seen Desi's smiling eyes in the rear-view mirror then and snickered to herself. At the end of the field was a slight descent down a dirt bank to the creek, which glinted harshly in the sun. Except for a few willow trees, the bank was wild-looking, dying trees, rotting or burnt-out trunks, thickets of bramble bushes, and trash-strewn weeds. The creek was about 40 or so yards across, much bigger than Ellen expected for something called a creek. But then they'd had a lot of rain from April on. She remembered Jessie complaining about the creek overflowing and leaving water snakes in the field, including water moccasins. Good thing she hadn't remembered that before she walked across it. She would ask Jessie to drive her to St. Stephen's Road so she wouldn't have to cross that field going back. Ellen squatted at the water's edge and splashed water on her face and throat as leaves, branches, cigarette butts, and other debris rushed by. She could see the smooth pebble bottom for 5 or 6 feet out, but then the water darkened quickly, the middle of the creek black as tar. Well, figuring from what Lester said that there must be a shallow place to cross, Ellen walked the bike upstream looking for where the water was light all the way across, a sandbar maybe. Soon, Ellen smelled cigarette smoke. 3 colored boys, or men, maybe, for they were wearing long pants, sat on logs in the shade of a willow about 50 feet away, the blue-gray smoke circling above them. Probably a lunch break from work, she thought, for the open paper bags on the ground nearby. One of them looked up and saw her, then said something, and the others turned to see. Ellen stiffened. She wished she had let Lester come with her. She pivoted and began to walk the bike downstream. Voices called out from behind her, but the rushing sound of the water muffled the words. She glanced back and saw them all standing and looking her way. The one who'd seen her first motioned toward her and with a raised arm. Was he summoning her? He must be drunk. Maybe all of them were drunk. Well, everybody knew about drunken brawls and knifings and so on in the quarters, though usually it was on Saturday nights. They probably figured she was older because of the bra, Ellen thought, and looking for trouble. Why else would a white girl come down here? Ellen looked up and down the bank, hoping to see someone she could call for help, but saw no one. Figuring it would take longer to go back up the bank than it would to cross the creek, she rushed into the water with her bike. Within 30 feet, the water, as cold as what Lester gave her, was up to her waist, and in 10 more feet to her brassiere. The bike, which she held on her upstream side, pushed hard against her and threatened her footing on the slippery mud bottom. Then suddenly, the bottom disappeared. Holding the bike with one hand and the other arm treading, she flailed her legs around looking for the bottom. Maybe she stepped into a hole. Something brushed across her ankle. A slippery, slightly sticky sensation, but the water was too murky for her to see it. A few seconds later, it began to coil itself around her calf. Ellen screamed. She kicked her leg out again and again, as though trying to sever it from her hip. In her frenzy, she didn't feel the freeing of her calf until a 3-foot length of twisted cellophane shimmered to the surface. Ellen exhaled with relief. The cover off some dry cleaning, perhaps. Then she saw her bicycle, half submerged and headed quickly downstream. She lunged toward it, but it fell an arm's length shy. Ellen suddenly heard water splashing behind her, then felt it fall on her head as a boy swam past toward her bike. "No, it's mine!" she yelled, pounding the water, swam after him. Stopping to catch her breath, she saw the bike 3/4 under and the boy about a car's length from it, both being carried downstream fast, too fast for her to ever reach the bike, she realized. But the boy might, and then the bike would be his, fair and square. Losers, weepers, finders, keepers, everyone knew that. She watched as the bike disappeared, the last speck of chrome glinting in the sun like a fish fin. The boy disappeared too, and a few seconds later, Murr re-emerged, holding the handlebars. Ellen's foot struck the bottom, a sucking sensation which made her think of quicksand, but she mucked on through to the bank. The boy got out on the bank a little ways down and carried the bike toward her, the middle of the frame resting on his hip as a mother might carry a baby. Huffing for breath, he propped the bike on the kickstand next to her. "Oh, here you go, miss," he said in puffs. "What?" Ellen said, mostly to herself in surprise. She felt immense relief for a second, then immense shame. He hadn't intended to claim it. Why didn't you use the footbridge?" "Where?" He pointed downstream, "Where the creek bends, that the herd willow down." Squinting into the sun, Ellen saw a crude bridge of planks and ropes extending from the willow's leafy branches into those of the willow on the other side, the brownish contraption almost blending in with the water. "I didn't see it." Her face flushed with embarrassment. That's what they were trying to tell her when they called out. He grinned. "City ain't seen it neither. Don't tell 'em." "I won't." "Well," he said, half turning toward the water, "I was thinking about swimming today, and now I get to do it twice a way." "Wait!" Ellen pulled what her father called mad money from her pocket and held the 2 soggy dollar bills toward him. He was midway between a boy and a man, she decided, like the lifeguards at the country club, who at any given moment could act like one or the other. "I appreciate you getting my bike." Ellen meant it so wholeheartedly that she looked him in the eyes as she spoke, something she seldom did with colored people, and never with any boy. His eyes were pretty, lighter than Desi's, and his lashes, still wet, were longer than Jenny's. He shook his head. "No thanks." "Oh, please take it. You saved me. My mother would still be yelling at me until this time tomorrow if I'd come home without my bike." "Well, all right, thanks," he said and took the bills. "I know what you mean about parents yelling at you." Ellen shivered in the wet clothes as she watched him swim across. The boy's friends were watching from the other side. She raised her hand and waved timidly. A path near the footbridge led through a grove of pine trees to a clearing where 4 shotgun houses stood in a row. Ellen crept up the steps of the first one and peered through the screen door. It was like looking through a tunnel, the darkness of a long, narrow hall with light at the end from the back screen door. The sound of a radio and the earthy, peppery aroma of Desi's collars wafted through the screen. Evidently, Mother Moore was not too down in the back to eat. "Desi?" Ellen called out at a volume she thought Desi would hear, but not Mother Moore. Thump, thump came the sound of the old woman's cane. Then her prune face appeared behind the screen. "Desi's busy, girl. What you want?" "I want to..." "Wait. You is Ellen, ain't you?" "Yes, ma'am. I need to talk to Desi," she said, raising her voice in the hope Desi would hear. "About what?" It's private." "Desi be to work Monday. You get on home." Ellen hesitated, her heart beating hard. Then she took a deep breath and called loudly for Desi. She heard footsteps in the darkness behind Mother Moore, and Desi appeared at the screen. She wore a pretty blue dress, and Ellen, who never seen her out of a uniform, suddenly felt shy. What if Desi didn't want to be bothered now in her own place and time? Why, Ellen, I was in the back and didn't hear you. Your mother come and want me after all? No, Mama doesn't know I'm here. I'm on my bike. I need to ask you something in private. It's very important. She felt its importance as she spoke, and her voice quivered at the end. Advice, said Mother Moore. Ain't your place to be giving advice to no white girl behind her mother's back. I'm not, Desi said. I'm just going to see what's wrong if I can help. Well, that's as bad as advice with her mama knows she's here. With a thump of her cane, Mother Moore stepped in front of the doorknob as though to block Desi. Listen here, Decimate. When her mama finds out, it's gonna get you fired. And her mama, you say, has got a bad temper, and it's gonna tell them rich women why. Who you think's gonna hire you then? Baloney, Ellen thought as she struggled not to grin. She and Desi both knew that if her mother found out she had come to the quarters, she would be the one in trouble, not Desi. She noticed Desi's lips were pressed together as Mother Moore spoke, no doubt holding the grin back too. But Desi's face when she turned from Mother Moore to her was serious. You better go on home, Ellen. I'll be there Monday. But Monday might be too late, and it won't take long. I just... Like I said, Desi interrupted. I'll be back to work on Monday. Okay then, Ellen said after a pause. As she mounted her bike, Desi called out for her to be careful, that she wasn't used to busy streets. Ellen barely nodded, not caring if Desi saw or not. When she reached the footbridge, she was glad to see that the boys were gone. If she opened her mouth to say anything to anyone at that moment, she would burst into tears. There seemed to be more trucks on St. Stephen's Road now, and the swoosh of hot wind and exhaust fumes as they sped past enveloped Ellen anew every few minutes. Again she had to walk her bike because the shoulder was narrow, but now she duck-walked it at a frantic pace. She was already an hour and a half later than her note said. No matter what story she came up with, she was in big trouble. And all for nothing. She would have bet her life that Desi wouldn't send her away like that. Why, before Mother Moore started that baloney, Desi had that, uh-oh, tell me what's wrong, Ellen, honey, look on her face. But then she sided with Mother Moore, and for no reason other than because she was her mother-in-law. Desi's ignoring Mother Moore's complaints about her hadn't meant a dang thing. When forced to choose between her and Mother Moore, Desi's loyalty was with her own family. It felt like an arrow in Ellen's heart. Desi wasn't the person she thought her to be. Sort of like with her father, Ellen realized as she sloughed perspiration off her forehead. She would have bet her life that he would never kiss a woman, even a beauty queen, other than her mother. Father wasn't like she thought he was either. Her back began to itch where the sweat had pooled again at the band of the dang brassiere. She reached her arm back, but this time only scratched at the pool through the t-shirt, which didn't help for long. Then she pressed toward home.